Imagine a crucial meeting where people from every corner of the globe gather to tackle climate change. In November 2025, COP30 took place in Belém, Brazil, right in the heart of the Amazon. The Amazon, the world's largest rainforest, was chosen to remind leaders of what's at stake. The main goal: create the Belém Declaration, outlining shared climate goals. The world watched, knowing the future of our climate depended on the outcome. COP30 was a moment of truth for global climate cooperation. COP30 brought together thousands from nearly 200 countries. At the center were official negotiators, government representatives debating every word of the final agreement. The Brazilian presidency, led by Andre Correa do Lago, worked to guide these complex talks. Leaders from nations like Colombia and blocs like the European Union attended, showing their commitment. Notably, the United States did not send an official delegation, sparking debate about its climate leadership. Scientists and experts provided the latest research, grounding negotiations in hard facts about rising temperatures and extreme weather. Civil society groups, environmental organizations, youth activists, indigenous leaders, and business voices added urgency and passion. Groups like Oxfam and AOSIS advocated for the most vulnerable, holding protests and pushing for ambitious action. Their presence reminded negotiators that real lives are at stake. The energy and diversity of voices at COP30 made it more than just a political event. It was a global call to action. The decisions made in Belém would ripple across the world. One major breakthrough at COP30 was a new agreement on climate finance. Richer countries committed to at least triple their support for adaptation, helping vulnerable nations cope with climate impacts. The new target, $120 billion per year for adaptation by 2035, as part of a $300 billion total climate finance pledge. This was celebrated as a sign of solidarity, especially by small island states facing rising seas. The deal sent a message. The world is starting to take the financial needs of the climate crisis seriously. But there were concerns. Critics like Oxfam stressed that funds must be grants, not loans, to avoid deepening debt. The deadline for the funding was pushed back to 2035, meaning more money, but a longer wait. While the finance deal was a spark of hope, many felt it was only a first step. The challenge now is to ensure the money reaches those who need it most, and fast. Climate finance remains a test of trust between rich and poor nations. The world will be watching to see if these promises are kept. Despite progress on finance, COP30 was deeply divided over fossil fuels. Fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas, are the main drivers of global warming. Many hoped for a clear plan to phase them out, building on the promise from COP28. But oil-rich nations, led by Saudi Arabia, resisted any mention of phasing out fossil fuels. They argued for focusing on emissions reductions and new technologies, not targeting specific fuels. This clashed with demands from other countries and scientists for a direct approach. Negotiations dragged on, but the final Belém Declaration omitted any reference to fossil fuel phase-out. For many, this was a huge disappointment, a step backward from previous progress. The omission felt like discussing a disease without naming its cause. The failure to address fossil fuels left a dark cloud over the conference. Even with gains in other areas, the root of the climate crisis remained unaddressed. The absence of fossil fuel language in the final agreement sparked outrage. Latin American countries, especially Colombia and Panama, called the deal a product of climate denialism. They accused oil-producing nations of blocking real progress and ignoring science. Uruguay joined in, saying vulnerable nations' concerns were sacrificed for powerful interests. The European Union, though disappointed, chose not to block the deal, calling it not ideal, but a step forward. This highlighted the tough choices leaders face: accept a flawed agreement, or risk no deal at all. The UN's consensus rule means a few countries can block progress for everyone. The fossil fuel fight exposed this weakness in the process. Many now question whether the UN system can deliver the urgent action needed. The rift at COP30 showed just how hard it is to unite the world on climate. The debate over how to move forward is far from over. With the conference divided, leaders searched for new ways to make progress. COP30 President Andre Correa do Lago promised Brazil would lead outside the main agreement, launching roadmaps for ending deforestation and transitioning from fossil fuels. Around 90 countries, led by Brazil and Colombia, formed a voluntary group to create their own national fossil fuel transition plans. This coalition showed that ambition could continue, even without full global consensus. The hope collective action by willing nations could inspire stronger agreements in the future. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres welcomed the finance progress, but warned the gap between action and science remains dangerously wide. He reminded the world that we're still on track to exceed the 1.5-degree warming target. Simon Steele, head of the UN climate body, ended on a note of determined optimism. "We're not winning the climate fight," he said, "but we are still in it. Even imperfect outcomes keep the struggle alive." The message, "Don't give up, keep pushing for a safer climate future." The battle continues, with every step forward hard won. The world's eyes now turn to the next COP. Beyond the headlines, COP30 delivered new plans for a fairer transition. The Just Transition Mechanism was officially included for the first time, aiming to ensure the shift to a green economy is fair for workers, women, and indigenous peoples. It promises training and support for those affected by the move away from polluting industries. However, no specific funding was set aside, making implementation a challenge. The agreement also strengthened recognition of indigenous land rights, vital for protecting forests and ecosystems. Brazil pledged to secure 59 million hectares of indigenous lands, backed by $1.8 billion. This concrete action gave hope to indigenous groups worldwide. The BACKLASH Gender Action Plan was adopted, putting women at the center of climate action for the next 9 years. It aims to boost women's leadership and ensure climate projects meet their needs. These initiatives move climate action beyond numbers, focusing on justice and equity. The challenge now: turn these plans into reality. A fair transition is essential for lasting climate solutions. COP30's decisions were shaped by decades of climate negotiations. At COP28 in Dubai, nations agreed for the first time to transition away from fossil fuels, a historic breakthrough. Many hoped COP30 would set a clear plan and timeline, but that step was missed. COP29 in Baku focused on climate finance, setting a $1.3 trillion annual target by 2035. The $300 billion pledge at COP30 was a direct follow-up to those goals. At COP27 in Egypt, countries created a loss and damage fund to help the most vulnerable recover from climate disasters. Each COP builds on the last, with progress often slow and hard-won. Sometimes, big pieces are added, like the loss and damage fund. Other times, key issues are left unresolved, like fossil fuels at COP30. The history of the COPs is a story of struggle, compromise, and hope. Each conference is a step in the ongoing global effort to protect our planet. As delegates left Belém, they felt both hope and disappointment. The new adaptation finance commitment was a real win for developing nations. It showed that global cooperation is possible and vulnerable voices are being heard. New plans for a just transition, gender equality, and indigenous rights were important steps forward. These initiatives move climate action toward fairness and humanity. But the failure to address fossil fuels left a major gap in the world's climate strategy. As Colombia's president said, "It's hypocrisy to solve the crisis without naming its cause." COP30 was progress in some areas, heartbreak in others. The world remains divided on the future of energy. The road ahead will be long and challenging. The fight for our planet's future continues, fueled by hope and urgency. The next chapter in the climate story is still to be written,